right in?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Hi, Dr. Doreen. My almost 5-year-old saw a developmental pediatrician Friday for the first time since he received his diagnosis at age 3. He has a mix between inattentive and hyperactive side, but mainly more inattentive. He has problems organizing himself and low frustration levels. After a series of questions and observations, he suspects he has ADHD. He is receiving 23 hours of ABA plus language therapy and OT. The doctor still has some questionnaires for teachers, but I don't want to do meds, even though the doctor said that this could keep him from meeting his full potential. I've seen improvements with the ABA, but he is still very inconsistent with his behaviors. Focused one day and talking functionally, and then he goes days with repetitive, non-functional communication. What other suggestions can you give me to help my son?
You know, there's a huge amount of overlap that occurs with kids with ADHD. As you started saying, inattentive, hyperactive type, and I was like, we're talking about ADHD here. Yeah. So there, you know, especially the inattention issue is, of course, a big part of autism as well, or the spectrum of autism. And the last year was, with the new DSM, is the first time that we are allowed to diagnose both simultaneously. Up to last year, if you had an ASD, you should not diagnose with ADHD. There was no, you would go with the more severe. But in any case, at this point, assuming that your child has, and that I'm not big into labels, I don't care, it's just a description of symptoms, assuming that your child does have some inattention, which could be due to their ASD or due to their ADHD or whatever it is, why not try some medication? My perspective is there's nothing, ADHD in particular, the theory at least is that biochemistry is different, that our brain functioning is quite different, and that is what is making it so hard to pay attention. Now, I mean, I don't know if you know individuals who don't have autism, who have ADHD. The truth is they are on a different level of speed, like they are completely in a different speed of functioning, and that is usually what leads to their inattention. So I know that people are very worried and cautious about putting their children on long-term medications, but I would suggest that it's worth a try, especially because the medications for ADHD tend to have an effect very fast. They're not like other, anxiety or depression medications where you have to have the child on there for 3 weeks. You actually should be able to see a change within a few days. So why not try? Try at the lowest dose, or titrate up a little bit and see how your child does. If you see that they're doing extremely well, all you're doing is really assisting them in learning faster, and I'm all for that. So, and again, if you have a really strong belief that you don't want to try anything of that nature, then just keep up with the ABA, because the ABA does work for all children, including children with ADHD. It's just if they have issues with hyperactivity or inattention, it just is a little bit slower process.
And what do you think about the fact that he's receiving 23 hours? He's 5.
Why not more?
Yeah,
why is he not receiving more? The truth is that when the original study was done to say 40 hours, and then I'll keep repeating this because I think it's pretty important. It was a random number that we came up with, 40 hours. The concept was the equivalent of full time. It could have been 50 hours. It could have been 60 hours, because we are awake. The idea was that we want to cover the child for all waking hours. And since parents were working 40 hours, then those 40 hours should be provided by another person, a therapist. And then the parents could subsidize that with additional time that they spend with their child. So really the idea was all waking hours. And I believe that Lovas would have even had various articles where he said that. You should have ABA with your child for every hour that he's awake. So, and that is obviously the most effective. In cases where there is no, limit on the funds, I have done 60 hours with children. So, and it is, of course, much more effective. The more hours, the more effective. We've published on this numerous times. So keep that in mind, that 40 hours is not the upper limit. There is no upper limit. The upper limit is as many hours as your child is awake. the lower limit, so there wasn't for a long time, there wasn't any kind of study. In fact, there still isn't a study that contrasts 40 to 25 hours. The study that was done originally contrasted 40 to 10 hours and showed that 10 hours a week is not effective as 40 hours a week. We know that. Okay. So then where did the 25 come from was that a bunch of other research showed that sometimes some kids who do 25 hours will do as well as the kids who are doing 40 hours. So it sort of broadened that group. But this was only, it was one study that was done on a group design and another study that just looked at 25-hour kids and said, yeah, it's pretty effective. They're learning pretty fast. So the truth is that if you doubled that, they'd be learning faster. So, and when we say 25, then people start to think, well, 23 is close enough. You're actually doing a little bit less than what's already not enough, in my mind. Yeah. So I think you should just try to increase your hours as well. I mean, 5 is the year where we have so much learning going on. Oh my gosh, there's kindergarten stuff is coming in, and it's pretty advanced interaction at that age with other children. 5-year-olds are really advanced. Yeah. So I would double it up. I would go as high as I could with hours because I think that'll really help as well. Thanks for bringing that up, Shannon.
And the other thing I want to address is diet.
Yes,
in terms of with ADHD, there are lots of different ideas at this moment in time. There have been a couple of studies that have suggested that perhaps an organic diet can reduce some of the symptoms that can accompany ADHD. That's something that we just talked with Dr. Copeland about last week. That if you wanted to watch that show, you could look at that specifically. And even with some kids, artificial colors and very specific colors is what I'm hearing from parents, that one child will react, because I'm struck by her comment that some days he's more there and some days he's not.
Yeah, and that does not sound like something like ADHD is pretty consistently across the board. So food or food additives or such could very much be influencing the child's behavior. You're absolutely right. From my understanding, the number one color that our kids react to is red, red food dye. And so if we have, try to avoid, there's a number of things. There are too many for us to list here, but obviously any kind of sugar and food additives or colorings, and just trying to use more natural and organic foods, those types of things do affect the child's activity level for sure. And then there's so much to discuss on this level. I mean, sometimes when children have yeast going on, they have this sort of spaciness, which seems like distractibility or looks like inattention in some ways. And so that's another factor. And I agree with you, Shannon. I think what we eat is a major factor in how we feel the next day. So you really should consult with a nutritionist perhaps or a dietitian and take a look at what are the things that will benefit your child.
Or even, maybe keeping a food diary on something like Skills, where you're mapping what the behavior is like so that you can look at it side by side.
Absolutely.
That if you notice that when you feed your child this particular thing, you see a spike in the behavior.
Right. I mean,
interesting.
That's the fantastic thing about writing down everything that our children eat. It's pretty amazing. You always find patterns. Yeah. And if you do keep track of it for maybe 2 weeks or so, and then just do a little rating on each page as well in terms of the activity level that day, every day, right? And just 1 to 5, high activity or low activity, inattention, do another one for inattention. And then you look and see, okay, these are the bad days, and what do we have in common in terms of food? So that's pretty important. But great ideas.
But do take a look at the organic thing. And we did a segment last week on how to be organic on a dime, how to be wise organic, only choosing things that were really essential to get organic, the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15, because studies have shown that good scientific studies that the amount of pesticide that goes into a child's system is directly related to how hyperactive they're acting. So
absolutely, and not just pesticides. I mean, I think we need to. I remember back in, this would have been like the early 90s, like maybe mid 90s. I had a family who, and this was really interesting. If you think about it, I now can look back at two sets of very interesting things. I don't think a lot has been published on this yet, but I had a family whose child was diagnosed, and then we had the neighbor across the street was diagnosed, and then another child in the same building was diagnosed. And we were treating these kids, and we were like, this is kind of weird that they're all in one little area, and it was maybe even more than 3. And of course, we found out that there had been major spraying of the building, insecticides.
Wow.
And I think either one of the children was an infant, the other one, the mom was pregnant or something like that at that time. So that's something to look into. Another cluster of children that we had many years ago in one region, we could only relate to closeness to these incredible, very, very detailed group of wires, cables that were throwing off electromagnetic fields pretty intensely because they were right under a radio station or something.
Wow.
So I think that we don't realize how many toxins we are exposed to in the world, and it is important to try to keep our kids safe from that as much as possible.
Okay, so you've got a bunch of different options to look at, but certainly upping that 23 of ABA
should help.
I think is absolutely a thing to wish for and fight for. Going on, we've got some questions about girls. The first one about an adult daughter. She says, the mom says, hello, I'm struggling to motivate my adult daughter. She can be very lazy. She says she wants to make better choices and participate more in activities, but she's all talk. Most days she refuses to go anywhere. How can I help her do more with her life? And thank you.
Well, I mean, and I love the questions because they always remind me of things that I haven't done. But you always you want to change your behavior. You definitely want to start with identifying the antecedents and consequences to the behavior, and then manipulating those to change the behavior. Very simple. So, what are and mostly we look at consequences, but you can certainly look at antecedents. For instance, you would like your daughter to do something, I don't know, some additional physical activity perhaps. And so that's the behavior that you'd like to increase, and you have to look and see what are some things that are reinforcers for her. What is a meaningful reinforcer for your daughter? These are not going to be the same things that are reinforcing to you. We each have different reinforcers in our lives. So first thing is to identify the things that are reinforcing to her, and then make access to those things contingent upon the additional behavior, the additional action or activity that you'd like to see. But be very clear on, what is her activity level now and exactly what you would like to increase. Like, be very clear so that you have an objective measurement of what it is you're trying to improve and what behavior change you're looking for, and make it very easy to accomplish initially, and pile on the reinforcer. And then gradually over time, what you do is you increase the contingency. So you increase the required behavior, and you gradually reduce the overtness of the reinforcer so that it mimics more natural life. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely. I'm just marveling at how
basic it is, right?
Well, but also how different everyone is on the spectrum, right? We acknowledge that everyone on the spectrum is different, but I also look at it and realize how different we are as parents. That on the flip side of this, we had a young adult daughter who had been writing into us a couple of years ago and said, what do I do? My mom doesn't want me to do anything. I'm not allowed to boil water. I'm not allowed to.
I do remember that.
Yeah, and now that young woman who took your advice started doing college at home online, and now she's in her first semester on campus taking classes.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story. I loved that one. Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, but how difficult it was for her mom to let her have a bigger life. And here's a mom who would like her daughter to have a bigger life. It's just, it's always very interesting what the different circumstances are, and everyone's different. And I love that this mom wants more for her daughter than her daughter currently currently thinks is possible. But I hope that we'll get to the same point where we'll hear back from this mom in a couple of years and say, and now my daughter is going and doing this, and I'm so proud of her. It can happen.
Absolutely. And I think the hardest thing is identifying those motivating factors. You think to yourself that she's not motivated by anything, but believe me, everybody's motivated by something.
Yeah.
It could be something unhealthy, which isn't good, and you want to search for more healthy motivators. But regardless, everyone has reinforcers, so you have to just find out what they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Like to go on to a question about an almost 5-year-old. Hi, Shannon and Dr. Doreen. I have a question. My soon-to-be 5-year-old son grinds his teeth some days, very minimal, and on other days it goes on the whole day. His OT told me to try to give him a chewy stick every time he starts grinding his teeth. And also, he's scripting a lot. He has tons of language and 5 to 6 word sentences. Sometimes he uses his scripting appropriately, but most of the time is not. He's considered high functioning and a really smart little boy, but the scripting is getting stronger. At school, they are teaching him appropriate language to say, and then they will implement a plan where they will take something away when he starts scripting and reinforce him when he's not, or when he uses language appropriately. What do you think about this, Dr. Doreen? And thanks so much.
So a couple of different things. So we're discussing, first of all, scripting, and then we're discussing the teeth grinding. And it doesn't sound like you have an ABA program at home. It sounds like there's some ABA occurring at school. To answer your question sort of in reverse, sure, what they're doing at school is fine. I mean, it works. They're reinforcing a positive behavior, and they're not reinforcing, or they're removing reinforcements for a negative behavior. But scripting, I've found, is usually if the child's, I guess the intent is to communicate. And a lot of times our kids don't know how to interact, and they'll take a script from something they've heard and they'll repeat it to someone because they think they're talking. When I was a kid, my mom says I used to sit and just scribble for hours because I thought I'm writing. And it's basically the same thing. You're scripting and you think speaking is the same as communicating, right? So if they're going to reduce the scripting by removing a reinforcer when it occurs, it would be very important to start to replace it with something appropriate. So it kind of matters that someone should be teaching appropriate language. In fact, scripting generally tends to go away when we are teaching appropriate speech anyway. So I highly recommend, and if this is a child who has, scripting is usually, by the way, something more high functioning in nature anyway. That means your child already has some language and some speech, and so that's a great sign. But I do think that you should be doing a pretty intensive ABA program at home to increase the appropriate speech, which will automatically eliminate the scripting. But aside from the scripting, I mean, you want to teach your child language and appropriate language and communication, and a child who scripts is capable of having typical language and communication. So please give your child a lot of ABA at home. Like, really seek that out and get that going, because that is integral and very crucial for a child like this. As for the teeth grinding, that could be a number of different things. It could be a sensory type of thing. It could be just a habit that has formed. It could also be a sensory in a way that you haven't thought of. For instance, when you teeth grind, your hearing changes. You hear things differently. So I would recommend trying to find out under what circumstances your child is actually teeth grinding, because it's unusual. Grinding teeth is usually just regular grinding of teeth usually occurs in our sleep. It actually occurs overnight. It's not something that we do awake. So if your child's doing it awake, I'm wondering what is going on sensory-wise in the mouth. If it is a sensory, let's say, lack of sort of, kids who have things like apraxia, for instance, the muscle tone in your tongue is not strong enough. So in that case, they might be doing some jaw movements or those types of things. Yes, it would benefit to have them bite on something that's a chewy toy if we're trying to increase the sensation in the mouth. Only if we're trying to increase the sensation in the mouth, because replacing it with biting on something chewy is not necessarily, you're not necessarily replacing it with something functional, adaptive, okay in the environment, because we don't want your child pulling out a chewy toy and doing that whenever they feel like. So the other question I have is this just sort of like a tick? Like, has it become a habit, in which case you just start replacing the habit with something more important, more appropriate, more socially appropriate, like chewing gum? So you kind of need to have an FBA done here, a functional assessment of some type, to determine what is the function of the teeth grinding. Why is your child grinding teeth? That becomes critical to how we deal with it. The first thing I would do is just very simply try to replace it with something that is more adaptive, more normal, which is chewing gum, for instance. But you also don't want to do that while they're, in school they're dealing with scripting, so that's fine. And the other issue is, is school doing anything about the teeth grinding? If it's occurring during the day, I would imagine they have some sort of intervention. You want to make sure you find out what that is, because you don't want two different interventions running in two different settings.
Okay, good point. And then do write us back and let us know what happened.
Yes, please let us know.
We'd love to hear. Okay, I promised another question about a teenage daughter. Somebody writes in and says, my teenage daughter is very argumentative and talks back to me a lot. How can I change or stop this behavior? And she says, thank you, with an exclamation point. And actually, I don't know that it's a mom. It could be a dad.
Right, but so here's a very, I guess, my question to you, which hopefully would act as an answer for you. Argument involves two sides, right? So don't argue. Walk away when she starts becoming argumentative. Just walk away. Discontinue the discourse.
Okay.
It's a very simple procedure to stop a discussion. The issue then becomes, does she follow through on whatever you requested? Okay. Which is a completely different thing. And that has to do with rewarding appropriately what you're asking her to do. But arguing, you can stop arguing by just not arguing. Walk away.
It's interesting. I'm putting that through my filter of kind of stuff that going on with Jem, who's about to be 12, and all of a sudden has turned into a man. The voice has dropped, and he's tall.
Oh my gosh!
I think he's a hair taller than me, and he's got a little bit of fuzz on the lip, and it's freaking me out completely, right?
Totally.
And I remember when he was 3 and saying, I need help, I need to get ABA right now, because when he's 15, I'm not going to be able to physically, get him to do something, so I have to have compliance before that. And I think I really overshot, because I think we're there now. He's 11, and I'm not going to be able to physically. But what that's done for me is it's forced me to have to stop arguing. There are times where I like to discuss things. I have the wop feature where he'll say something and I go, you don't need to talk to me that way. I'm a good person and I feed you wop, right? It does no good whatsoever. And I notice that a lot of times when I want him to do something, he'll start, that back at me about, I'm doing this or whatever. And I just the other day, instituted a thing with him where I just don't have time right now to deal with that. I mean, quite honestly, I just don't have time right now. And so I said to him, I need you to do something, and he didn't do it. And then I reminded him like 30 seconds later, I said, you haven't responded to my request. I just want you to know that I noticed that. And I walked away. And he started packing, because he was so afraid, oh my gosh, somewhere down the line she's going to get upset. He started packing everything up. I've done it 3 times now, and he just is Johnny on it. And it's so much less energy to just say to him, I want you to know, I requested you to do this. I've noticed that you're not doing it. And then he gets it together.
Right. And sometimes it's even, and that's a very good point, right? Because arguing is usually a process by which we delay doing something. Yeah. So when someone says do something and the person starts arguing with you, it's a delay tactic. Yeah. That's what it is. So not allowing the arguing, just walking away is a very effective thing. Now, what's actually I always, when I have these situations with my kids, it's funny, I always try to figure out how can I do the things differently. And I like in a situation like that, I think our instruction is maybe not clear.
Okay.
Because maybe what we're saying is, I'd like you to do something, and we're not putting a time frame on it.
Right.
Like maybe what you really want to say is, I'd like you to do something in the next 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to come back and remind. Like you could just say, it's now 4 minutes. It's now 3 minutes.
Right.
Like the real thing for you, I mean, and maybe the individual doesn't realize that when you say, I want you to do something, you mean right now.
Right.
They think they can do it later.
Yeah. Well, and even when you said, I noticed the other day that I said something to him, I said, would you like to do this? And he said no. And I thought, well, that's really ridiculous that and I then said to him, I said, Mom made a word mistake. You need to go do this. I framed it as a question when there wasn't really a choice in this. I need you to go do this. I need to be more specific with my language.
Well, and you need to start transferring, yes, you need to be more specific with your language, but you also need to start transferring the thought process over to him.
Yeah.
Like this is one of those things that as parents we tend not to do, and especially as parents of children who have been on the spectrum, we tend to think for them. You need to start having him think it through. In other words, if he says no, then sit down and take the time to say, okay, what will happen if you don't do it? Because the person needs to, and ultimately it's their decision still, but they need to be the one that say, okay, I don't do it, this happens, and then that happens, and oh yeah, I don't want that third outcome, so I better do it. You know what I mean?
Fascinating. I learned so much here. I do. No, because I see, I know that I need to be stepping back and letting him motor him and make mistakes. I need to let him make mistakes and motor through things. And I need to focus on myself and how I'm reacting to things. So that if my son, because we're talking about a girl here who's argumentative, and I have seen my son participate in that recently. That's how we got off track here. But that I really don't have that much control over what he does. I have infinite control over what I do.
Absolutely.
And taking that empowerment and doing something with it instead of being frustrated and taking my frustration hose and sticking it on his face.
Don't ever communicate. I mean, one of the things I've learned from my own children is that it's always best not to communicate when you're frustrated.
Yeah.
But to step away from it and think, why am I frustrated? What is this lighting up in me?
Yeah.
And then to go back, or why are they arguing? I mean, it's one of the things I do sometimes with my kids is I'll say, so right now you're arguing with me. What is a different way to say whatever it is you're intending? Because I'm not getting it. Like, what's the intention of this argument? Be clearer with me.
Yeah.
And it makes them think. It makes them more aware of their own stuff. And that, I think, is the biggest gift you can give to anyone, is just making them more aware of themselves and their own intentions and their own feelings about things, and that's a huge gift.
That empowers them.
Yeah, absolutely. Through life, yeah.
Absolutely amazing. Okay, write back to us and let us know what ends up happening. Okay. Next question here. Hi, ladies. My son, 4.5, been with CARD 40 hours, is attending a main preschool, 15 hours, is on the GAPS diet, sleeps great, he is doing good, he reads and has a lot of vocabulary. Still can't answer a simple question. Lately, he has been writing letters with his fingers on countertops, on the floor, in the air, etc. Even at school, he gets sand, puts it on the concrete, and starts to write. Seriously. What can I tell my team and myself to do? I got on your calendar and you met my kids. Is this a good sign? Please help. Also, his skills account frightens me. As much as he is learning, he is still low on the bar graphs. Should I be worried? Okay, and they gave information about which office they're in so that I can tell you if you need to know who it is, but I'm not going to share that.
I'm not sure.
I can write you right now.
Yeah. Well, did they give any information about how long? And the child is 4?
4.5.
Right. So first of all, 4.5, you should not be worried. He seems to be doing well from what you're telling me. he's learning things, and you have a full program, and he's in a mainstream classroom, which is in itself a very good sign. The fact that he's not answering simple questions is, they should be working now on WH questions in his program. That's a lesson, and that lesson should prompt him to respond to questions and ask questions as well. And given that he is showing an interest for letters, that's a good thing. It seems like a bad thing, but actually you can turn it into a good thing. So we panic when our kids do these sort of rote, repetitive behaviors because we think like, oh, self-stimulation, what am I going to do with this? But, an interest in letters is actually a useful self-stimulatory behavior. It often indicates hyperlexia and that the child is very good with letters. And that's a wonderful thing because you can actually significantly speed up learning by having the child read. So, for instance, you would like the child to answer a question. Let's say, what did you do in school today? That might be more advanced than where he's at, I don't know, but any question, like, what did you eat? Whatever. And you would write the answer and actually just flash the answer to the child. Mm-hmm. And it seems very rote initially, but it doesn't matter because you can teach maybe 10 different answers and they would be relevant to that day. For instance, it actually is whatever he ate. And that will give him the idea of what it is you're expecting, and then you can fade away the visual prompt. But children who are readers, they learn exponentially faster because you have this ability to prompt them with words. So, and they learn from the words around them, from books. Please allow him to read, encourage him, and there's nothing wrong with it. Yes, I know we will continue to redirect when he's like writing in the sand or air writing or whatever it is, because that in itself is not appropriate, but your staff should be redirecting it to writing, actually, or doing things like crossword puzzles or reading books or whatever it is, depending on his level, or matching word to picture. I mean, there's a lot you can do with words. So I wouldn't panic or worry. I don't know when I've seen your child. If I do have the information of who your supervisor is, I will get our clinical director, Evelyn Kong, to take a look at your program and to make sure that you're on the right path. And I think that's the best step. And you can always ask your supervisor to set up a consult with our clinical director. This is what Evelyn does all day long. She consults on all the cases.
And what I remember about this period of time as a parent is that I was panicked the entire time.
Of course.
I was panicked the entire time.
Of course.
Are we going to get there? Don't we need to be? What page do we need to be on?
Right.
What's happening? Why aren't we further? I
know,
think I drove our team
you.
crazy because I couldn't see where we were going to go or where we were going to get. And I wanted everybody to write me a written guarantee. I kept saying I wished for a crystal ball. If I could just look into the future, look through the crystal ball and see that we were going to be okay, then I could calm down. But nobody could give that to me because that doesn't exist. That's not realistic. But here is what I have to say to you is that you're going where you're going and you're going to get there no matter what, no matter how much you worry.
It's true.
And if you get there, if you look at the two different scenarios about, okay, we're going to get to the exact same place, or potentially if I put the worry down, if I could get even 5 steps further in 5 years, would it be worth it to put the worry down? Just for your kid's sake. But how about for you? If you sit down for a couple of minutes and think, all right, I'm going to continue to worry at this pace, and in 5 years, we're going to be at this space, but what does my life look like?
Right.
Or we're going to be at that space, and I decided not to worry and to just get a little bit more active. It might be that you're already doing everything you can think of, but if you could spend 10 more minutes a day doing something with your child that you were currently spending worrying, what would that do over 5 years?
It's true.
Just for your kid, but then let's talk about how different you will be. If I could do anything over again, I would go back and give myself a worryectomy.
Yeah, and that's a great position and a great option, and I love that, because I think so many parents need to hear that, that you should really try to not worry about these things.
It's hard though.
It's extremely hard, and I'm gonna suggest a different perspective altogether as well, and you can choose. So one thing is, every time you worry about something, write it down and give it to your supervisor. Just hand it off to someone, because it is their job to worry. That's their job. They should be the one worrying. Your job is to hand your worries over to them. Okay, now that's impossible because you're a mom or dad, and we worry for our kids much more than a third person would. But hand it all over, and hand it over in writing. Okay, because then they feel an obligation to handle whatever you gave them. That thing that you gave them is now their obligation. The second thing I want you to do is this. Pick one day in the week where you don't worry. Just pick one day. Or 1 hour every day. Just say from 10 to 11, I'm not allowed to think about this. Or from 1 to 2, I'm not allowed to think about whatever. Pick an hour. Or just say, today's Thursday, on every Thursday or to every Wednesday, I'm not going to worry. Okay? And then worry the rest of the time, because you're not going to stop it. Just give yourself a very specific period of time not to worry. But I feel like it's so hard as a parent, and I have 3 kids, and I worry about everything, and then I get really, really tired, and I think, gosh, I wish, I wouldn't worry. And it doesn't matter what age they are. I used to worry about them when they were newborns. Then you're worrying about different things. And I worry about them now that they're in college. You worry about different things. So it doesn't matter. You're constantly worrying. Yeah. But the thing is, at some point, you just have to trust the universe. And at some point, you just have to, go with what's in your child's way. You are definitely doing more, which is watching our show, for instance. You've already come to see me. It sounds like you're really on top of this case, of your child's case, and your clinical involvement is great. So I would suggest that you write down your stuff and hand it to your supervisor. Become friends with Evelyn Kung, who is a fantastic clinical director. Email her all of your thoughts, your concerns, whatever it is. Just hand it over to someone else. You have a lot of people at CARD who care, so please keep communicating with them. And Shannon, I'd love to know which office it is.
Okay, I will make sure that you know.
Thank you.
Hello, my 7-year-old is high functioning and verbal. She can be calm one moment and suddenly get angry if we don't understand her. Could be that we didn't hear her or pronunciation. Sometimes the sudden anger is from not getting the answer she expects, even if it's made up bedtime story. Is this flexibility? And thank you.
No, this is just frustration. It's really simple. I always say that behavior, challenging behavior, is just a way to communicate. And so she's just frustrated for whatever reason it may be. And in the past, it has gotten your attention when she becomes angry or expresses herself loudly or tantrums or whatever it is. I don't remember their exact wording. But so it has been an effective tool for her. It has been an effective mode of communication. My recommendation is, obviously, you need to not respond when she raises her voice or when she tantrums or, well, what did they say exactly was the way that the issue?
She can be calm one moment, suddenly gets angry if we don't understand her. Could be that we didn't hear her pronunciation.
I don't know how she expresses that anger, but when she does express anger, the best thing you can do is to walk away. And next time, what you need to do is try to attend to her very much every time she's talking normally, because you want to increase normal talking and decrease anger. With my child, my youngest, who's a teenager, if she says something to me in a way that just sounds very teenagery, I'll just simply walk away. Right. I'll pretend like I didn't hear it.
And what's important,
it can escalate. I don't care.
You don't say to her, I'm walking away from you right now.
I'll just walk away.
Which is what I want to do. You just turn it, it's like the lights have gone off and you walk away.
Yeah.
That's hard.
It is hard, and sometimes I'll actually give her a specific look before I walk away, because I'd like her to learn that the look I'm classically conditioning the look to the exit because I'd like her to know that when she gets that look, she needs to cut it out. Otherwise, the next thing that's coming is the exit.
Okay.
So, and I don't communicate. She can do whatever she wants and I won't communicate. And then literally 5 minutes later, when the whole thing is over, I act like it didn't happen. I will go back in and say, honey, do you want something for a snack? Or it did not happen. So that's extinction. Extinction is the behavior did not happen. Not that you go and have a discussion about it.
Right.
And so that's pretty important that you ignore the behavior, but you reward the good behavior. So if your child communicates in a positive way, in a normal way, you need to reward that. You need to pay attention to that. And you know, it is difficult sometimes if our kids, if you think she's not hearing it, or you're not hearing what she said, I'm not sure, figure out what it is that's causing the anger. Sometimes it'll be you simply can't have something, and that's fine. I mean, that's how life is.
Yeah.
But make sure you do not give in. See, we don't realize how much. I was just talking to my husband yesterday, and he was upset about someone's someone was dealing with him and it was giving him guilt. Okay. And I said, you've nothing to be guilty about. And he said, yeah, but it makes me feel guilty, and I know that this is going to happen again and stuff. And I said, if this happens, it's only because you give in. They do this behavior, you feel guilty, and then you give in. So what you've done is you've reinforced that person for making you feel guilty, and they'll keep doing it because it's effective for them. So everything we do, we are bringing it about in our environment. It's always really important to think of how we interact and how we reinforce others, how we can just walk away from behaviors that we don't really want in our lives.
I love to look at words and what they mean and look at the root of the word. And a couple of years ago, I was listening to a program where they talked about the word to bait. That the root of the word comes from to offer. And that when someone baits you, they're making an offer, and you choose to accept it or you choose not to accept it.
Very interesting.
Isn't that? Because it puts it in a whole other light.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is absolutely up to you whether you are baited or not.
Yeah, it's an offer.
Take the bait or don't.
Say, no, thank you, I don't want that.
That's great.
All right,
I
really
love that.
quickly, because we only have like a minute left. That clock is a little bit fast.
And you know that I have to be upstairs at 11.
I do. So very quickly, I'm only going to give you 1 minute to answer
Sure.
this. Dr. Doreen, you have an incredible team of people who are not only experts but care about our kids.
Oh, thank you.
Are there plans to create services which could continue as our kids become adults and parents pass on? I'm counting on you to be the Wells Fargo which can deliver mail 100 years into the future. If anyone can do it, you can. If there is anything we can do to support that initiative, please share, and thank you so much. And she writes, the Wells Fargo comment Back to the Future movie. So
that's really lovely. I appreciate that. That gives me goosebumps, that email, and thank you so much. We have a really great adolescent and adult program now. I want to make sure you know about that. So what we're doing is we are trying to grow with our population as much as possible. We are truly excited about our adults program and very, very passionate about it. It's going in multiple different directions. First of all, we're offering it everywhere. We've finished training our key adult program experts at our various sites. The person who is in charge of the entire thing altogether right now is Sarah Cho, who's our director of operations, who is hugely influential at CARD and very, very passionate about this. As much as I wanted to try to get her off of this project and have her do other things, she wouldn't drop this one. So there's a few people that are incredibly passionate about our adult program. We do everything for our adults, from recreational activities to teaching them vocational skills to anything, you name it. And even for our higher functioning Asperger's type adults, we will work with them to get them in college and help them as much as we can in all different ways. So that is available. Now, hopefully, one of the dreams, and I always repeat my dreams even if I haven't been able to get them to happen. One of my dreams, and we're getting closer in some ways, I feel, but one of my dreams is to have communities that allow safe residential placement for our adults. Right now, we're starting to partner with a bunch of different people who would offer jobs to our adults. And a very good friend of mine and yours, Lubis Mara, now also is very interested in these options and working with us. And, together we're trying to develop the option to have communities, farms, villages where it's safe housing, and of course all of these other things: education, vocational training, housing, opportunities for recreation, all that sort of stuff in a safe environment. So we're heading there. I think we're maybe 3 or 4 years away from having something that's very solid, but our adult program is certainly out there and solid right now.
Wonderful. I always say you're a visionary.
Thank you so much.
These are the visions that she has for all of us.